Like you've never seen before. We have obtained exclusive footage that goes behind the scenes of a murder case. The video was brought to us by a doctor who believes new medical technology can look inside the mind of an accused killer and determine if they're lying. It's another Making a Murderer story, one you haven't heard. Now, we're about to take you through the case step by step, asking the tough questions. Where do medicine and the law come together? Can science help us tell the truth from a lie? And can we, and should we, look inside someone's mind to know if they're guilty of a crime? By the end of the show, you'll decide for yourself. This is former Army Ranger Gary Smith. 6 months after returning from his last tour in Afghanistan, he was accused of shooting and killing his roommate, fellow Army Ranger Michael McQueen. Take a look at what happened in their Maryland apartment the night Michael lost his life.
Michael McQueen and Gary Smith, both ex-Army Rangers who served together in Afghanistan, begin the night of September 25, 2006, smoking marijuana and bar hopping. The two veterans are also roommates, and later that night end up back at their apartment. What happens next ended one life and changed the other forever. Just after midnight, Smith places what has been described as a panic call to 911. He tells the operator that he and McQueen were drinking and that he dropped McQueen off at their house. When he returned home, he found McQueen with a hole in his head. Police respond to the call and find Smith outside the apartment, hysterical and covered in blood. Inside, they find McQueen dead from a gunshot wound to the right side of his head. No gun is found. Forensics experts process the crime scene, taking photos and cutting out a portion of the blood-splattered carpet. Gunshot residue samples are taken from both Smith and McQueen's hands. Smith is taken into custody. Under interrogation, he tells police conflicting stories. In one, he says he returned home to find McQueen dead. In another, he says he heard a shot as he was leaving the bathroom and came out to find McQueen with blood coming out of his head. The police press Smith for a confession.
How did he die?
Killed himself.
Nope. Tell me the truth.
I swear on the grave of my friend Mike. I'm telling you the truth.
What really happened to Michael McQueen that night and to Gary Smith in the years after? That extraordinary story is just beginning.
In 2008, the case went to court and made national headlines. But the investigation into Michael McQueen's death was just starting.
March 18th, 2008. Gary Smith goes on trial for the murder of Michael McQueen. McQueen died of a single gunshot to the right temple as he sat in his living room. Both sides agree Smith had no motive to kill McQueen, but they disagree on how McQueen died. The prosecution calls it homicide. Smith, they say, was the shooter. The defense calls it suicide and paints McQueen as depressed and despondent.
I didn't know what to do. I didn't know whether to grab him and pick him up. I looked at him, I saw the blood. I didn't know what to do.
Under interrogation, Smith changed his story, casting doubt on his credibility. Among the most damaging evidence, the gun used was Smith's .38 caliber, and after the shooting, he quickly disposed of it in a nearby lake. But Smith's lawyers say post-traumatic stress disorder accounts for the former Army Ranger's changing stories and paranoid behavior that night. The autopsy reveals that the shot fired into McQueen's head went from right to left. There was no blowback residue or blood splatter on his right hand. Consequently, the state's forensic pathologist calls it homicide. Experts for the defense disagree, arguing the gun was held in a place and angle consistent with suicide. Gun residue samples were found on both Smith's and McQueen's hands, but that evidence is considered inconclusive. After a 12-day jury trial, Smith is convicted of second-degree murder and sentenced to 35 years in prison. Smith maintains his innocence. He appeals and on a technicality is granted a retrial. In preparation, Smith's legal team turns to a new medical technology they hope will convince the next jury that Smith is telling the truth.
Back, going inside the murder case against former Army Ranger Gary Smith, who in 2008 was sentenced to 35 years in prison for killing his roommate and fellow soldier, Michael McQueen. But then, the case went back to court, and Gary's team turned to a new medical technology in an attempt to clear his name.
September 2012. Gary Smith has been in prison for 6 years. Now, he's out on bond, ready to go back to court in hopes of winning his freedom.
I want to vindicate myself. I want to prove my innocence. Did not kill my friend and my roommate, Michael McQueen.
The arguments will be the same. Was McQueen's death a murder or a suicide? Is Smith telling the truth? But this time, Smith's legal team decides to take a chance on a different, new kind of evidence. An fMRI lie detector.
The first test is the test that relates to your court case. So they're really going to be just straightforward, simple, short questions.
An fMRI maps brain activity. Proponents say they can use it to determine if someone is telling the truth. Why? Because your brain activity can look different when you lie compared to when you tell the truth.
What we see is that to intentionally lie is hard work, and it requires a lot more of the brain to be active than when you are telling the truth.
This is the button box. With this index finger, you're going to press yes, and with your middle finger, you're going to press no. So there's only two answers.
Okay, now we're ready to perform the first part of the first test. Basically, we're going to be asking questions about your court case.
The test complete, Smith and his league now wait for the results.
Dr. Robert Huizenga joins me now. That was your footage, your technology. What was it like when you joined Gary going into that device?
I was very scared, I have to admit. I've done a lot of interviews, and I'm thinking to myself, here's a trained killer, an Army Ranger, who was convicted of murder, and I've agreed to interview him a couple days later to give him the results. He claims he's innocent. Of course, lots of convicts might say that in jail. And like, what was it going to be like to look a guy in the eye and say, you're a cold-blooded murderer, you did it, you've been lying all along? And I was panicked.
So Dr. Huizenga and his brother have a business that's trying to market fMRIs for use in the criminal justice system. You've become very passionate about this area. Why is it so important?
I believe this could change the way that we see each other. I mean, we can call people's bluff, and it's the first unbiased, scientifically backed way to differentiate a lie from truth-telling. And there's 102 articles about it, over 500 authors, multiple machines, multiple countries. It's very robust scientifically. I know you're a scientist at heart. This is not some fly-by gimmick.
So polygraphs, the lie detector test that everyone knows about, they're sort of the standard for detection, but they're not allowed in court either, right?
They're not allowed in court because they're totally inaccurate. Even the CIA says they only work 60% of the time.
So why do you think this technology offers a solution where they fail?
Well, this offers a solution because everything else hasn't been studied. Ballistics, blood spatter that you heard mentioned there, toxicology, even fingerprinting. They're grandfathered forensic techniques, never been scientifically validated. Now we have, short of DNA, the first scientifically validated forensic study, and I think it's going to be crucial if we're interested in a better judicial system going forward.
MRIs for 1 second, just to get you on the same page. So they're used right now for checking memory, diagnosing Alzheimer's, chronic pain. It's something that we can tell if you truly have it or not based on fMRIs. It's a great tool to image the brain, but it's a big step to go beyond that because it's largely experimental when used for things like, for example, telling if someone's telling you a lie or not.
Well, it's been out for 15 years, so yes, it's experimental. Yes, more studies always have to be done, but even at this stage, it's a far more reliable technique than a lot of the stuff we're using.
Kind of show everybody what we're talking
Sure.
about. Dr. Huizenga believes they can help you detect a lie. So I want you to take an opportunity to explain to everybody how this might work. So let's start off with a polygraph. Get
Absolutely.
folks to appreciate what this
Here
does.
you can see they're just basically testing peripheral nervous function. What's your heart rate? What's your breathing rate? How much are you sweating? These are peripheral nervous functions, but as you know, some innocent people are very anxious, they fail. Some guilty people, calm as a cucumber, they pass. Not a great test. Now, when you look at the functional MRI, you're going inside the brain. This is a paradigm shift in how we analyze truth-telling. And they go inside this machine, and they can't move a muscle. If you move it, invalidates the test. And you just yes, no to very critical questions. And we asked 20 questions. 5 of them are simple truths, you know. What car do you drive? Things that we can validate. Then, in this case, we would say to Mike McQueen, to Gary Smith, did you share an apartment with Mike McQueen? That's an emotional truth. And he says yes. Then we tell him, lie on everything related to your military experience. And then we see what his brain does there. Then we ask the questions we're interested in, you know. And we're looking what goes on in the brain when he tells the truth, what goes on in the brain when he lies. And I'd like to do an example with you. Sure. I'm going to ask you to honestly tell me, are you a physician practicing in New York City?
I am.
Okay, this is what the MRI would look like if you answered that inside that machine. And you can see a series of areas light up. The color is a function of the delta, the change in blood flow to those areas. Which areas are working harder? And the shocking thing is not that we see a picture of your brain, but that every one of different ethnicities, ages, and even languages has the same pattern for truth-telling. That's a shock. No one ever expected that. Right. So now I'm going to ask you a question. I want you to intentionally lie. When you were a medical student, were you class president?
I was not.
That's a lie, I know that. And so if we asked you that question under the machine, a totally different but yet reproducible area of the brain lights up. Because when you tell the truth, that's relatively simple. But when you have to massage the truth and you have to come up with a lie, that requires a lot more brain power, and different areas of the brain light up. But again, the shock is that different people, even people with psychiatric disease, that the same areas light up when you're telling a lie. And that's the basis of this whole new technology.
Exclusive footage brought to us by a doctor who claims a brain scan can determine whether or not someone is lying. Accused killer Gary Smith hoped his results would clear his name. Take a look.
How's it going, doctor?
Good, good. Nice to finally meet you.
You too.
What we did with your brother is we asked him 20 questions, and they all randomly popped up every 4 or 5 seconds, so he didn't get a chance to even think about them. So based on these questions, we got a very good, very clear idea about what Gary's brain does when he lies and what Gary's brain does when he's telling the truth. So then we asked him 5 questions that had to do with this criminal case. We didn't know what the answer was. You've been one of Gary's biggest supporters, so I want you to read and tell me whether you think this matches up best with the truth or whether Gary has in fact been lying all along.
It's definitely the truth.
It's definitely the truth.
Yeah.
You were telling the truth.
I'm back with Dr. Robert Huizenga, who we just saw give Gary Smith his fMRI results. I'm also joined by David Moisey, Gary's defense attorney. Thank you both for being here. So, were these fMRI results we just saw delivered to Gary admissible at that second trial?
No, unfortunately, the judge on the second trial excluded the results, and we expected that going in.
You expected it?
We did. It was a tough road to get them in.
So if you didn't think it would be part of the trial, why did you bother getting the test?
Multiple reasons. I mean, number one, we knew Gary was innocent, and we wanted to shine a light on that. We wanted the prosecutor, the judge, the victim's family to see these results and hopefully have some small impact on their thoughts. And as well, we believed in the technology, and it's got to start somewhere. You've got to try and hopefully get progress in getting these kinds of things admitted.
So, Mr. Moyes, what happened at the second trial? What was the outcome?
Well, it was over 2 weeks. The jury deliberated for a while, and unfortunately, they convicted Gary not of second-degree murder this time, but of involuntary manslaughter and use of a handgun. So the case was lowered in charge, but he was sentenced to 28 years in jail.
28 years?
Yes. It was devastating, but it was not the end of the road, and we kept fighting.
So Dr. Huizenga felt so passionately about Gary's fMRI results that he actually tracked down the jurors of that trial after the sentencing to see if it would have changed their minds if they'd seen the results.
I think it was unjust that we were not able to hear anything about the new technology.
If this had been presented definitely raises questions in my mind.
I knew that, he wasn't guilty.
I felt Mr. Smith was not guilty, and I'm ashamed. I'm ashamed of this justice system.
She said she was ashamed.
I was so angry sitting in that court and seeing the injustice. Number one, we have a method. Why does the judge get to take the power out of the hands of the people? Let's let the jurors decide if this is accurate or inaccurate, like they do for every other forensic test. Why can a judge just out of hand throw out one of the most accurate techniques we have out there?
Night of September 26, 2006, Michael McQueen was found shot dead in the apartment he shared with fellow Army Ranger Gary Smith. Smith was twice convicted of killing his roommate. Although he served 6 years in prison, both convictions were overturned on appeal. Throughout, Smith maintained his innocence. At one point, he even tried to present an fMRI brain scan in court as evidence that he was telling the truth and did not kill McQueen. Before he went to trial for a third time, Smith's lawyers successfully negotiated a plea bargain, and today Gary Smith is a free man.
Gary Smith is here today for his first ever television interview. So Gary, only you know the truth. Did you kill Michael McQueen?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not.
So when you spoke to the police that night, when you were interrogated, you lied.
Yes, I did.
What was the story you told them?
I originally told them that, I came home and found him that way. And then through talking to him at one point in the interrogation, they mentioned the gunshot residue. I finally calmed down and realized, that'll prove I didn't do it. And I told him what really happened.
If you're innocent, why would you lie?
I just panicked. I just made one mistake after another. On top of that, I'd been drinking, so my thought process at the time wasn't a good one. I'd been drinking and smoking marijuana, and just a mixture of panic and bad choices.
In the course of the stories you were telling, this gun, it disappeared, it was thrown in the pond, you claimed it wasn't yours, then it was. I mean, how did Michael get that gun?
I gave him access to it. I gave it to him that night.
You came home and just handed it to him?
I believe I set it down next to him, and he wanted to.
It was your decision to go after this fMRI scan that would look inside your brain and try to figure out if you were telling the truth or lying. Why'd you want to go to that extreme measure?
Because I wanted to use every avenue possible to prove that I didn't kill my friend. I loved him. I'd never hurt him.
Can I go to your mom for a second?
Oh, absolutely.
I'll come back to you. But Gary's mother, Rosemary, is in the audience. So, Rosemary, I know that Gary took a plea deal to stay out of prison. What's it like to have him back at home with you?
It's wonderful to have him back home, but it's been a long 9 years.
Did you ever doubt his innocence?
Never, not for a second.
Did you ever talk to him about why he lied when he was first interrogated?
Yes, we did discuss it.
So, this plea deal you took allows you to be here with us, but it doesn't exonerate you. It sort of leaves you in a little bit of limbo.
Yes.
What's that like?
It's hard, but I wanted to move on with my life. And a big decision in taking this plea deal was, should I put my family through a third trial? Should I put his family through a third trial? And ultimately, through the advice of different people, I decided to take it.
So, Mr. Moyes, he's out of prison now and he's not going back to prison?
Completely out.
Okay. So can we just leave all that behind us?
Yes.
I want to actually hear from you, now that you're free.
Yes.
What the heck happened that night? I want to hear it from you with no strings attached. There's so much confusion in my mind still, and I've studied your case.
With no strings attached, after a night of drinking and doing drugs, which were two things I shouldn't have been doing anyways, I made the bad decision to give a loaded gun, to my friend. And as a result of that, he died.
But why would he pull the trigger at his head?
Same thing I told the police. I have no clue. Like, he could have been playing around. He could have, it's possible he could have done it on purpose, but still to this day, I think he was just playing around with the gun, and it went off.
And why wouldn't you have said that to the police?
Well, they kept asking me for a reason, like why, and I told them, I said, I don't know why. And as they kept pushing me, they said, well, there has to be a reason, there has to be a reason. And finally, I just gave him a list. I said, I don't know. His girlfriend had just broken up with him. His girlfriend of 6 years had just broken up with him. He just came back from deployment. He doesn't have a job. You know, and I gave him those, but that was only after they repeatedly asked the question, and I prefaced it with, you know, I don't know, maybe it was these things.
Did you see him pull the trigger?
No, I didn't.
Where were you?
I was in the hallway, which is behind the living room.
What were you doing there?
I was walking out from my room. Well, my bathroom is back in my room, which is all the way at the end of that hallway. And I was walking out back towards Mike.
And when you heard the shot?
When I heard the shot, I didn't really, there was about maybe a second or two before I actually saw him. And when I heard the shot, like I really didn't know what to think. I knew something happened, but it was so quiet, like it wasn't a regular gunshot. It was so quiet, so a couple things might have gone through my head as to what happened. But I rounded the corner and saw what had happened rather quickly, right after that, and just made one bad decision after the next.
So it leaves a young man dead.
Yes.
This evening, and we haven't talked as much about him. But I want to hear what you have to say to Michael McQueen's mother, who lost her son that night.
I'm very, very sorry for her loss. He was my friend, but he was your son. I didn't kill him, and I truly wish from the bottom of my heart that she gets peace. And he was just a great guy. That's all I want to say about him. And just let her know that he was a great guy. And I loved him with all my heart.
And Rosemary, you still have your son. Years of his life were taken in prison, but he's still with you. What would you say to Michael McQueen's mom, who will never have her son in his arms again?
My heart breaks for her. I can't even imagine the grief and pain that 9 years of trials put her through. But I can understand some of it. I've buried a son as well, and it's not something you ever get over. You just move on. So I hope that she finds peace.
Oh, we've gone through a real murder case, from evidence presented in court to the controversial medical test results that claim to be able to detect a lie. We've even heard from the accused killer himself. But in every true crime case, it's important to remember and honor the victim and to give a voice to the family left behind. So we reached out to Michael McQueen's mother, Glenda McQueen. She did not wish to be here today, but she sent us a statement. Here's part of what she had to say.
Thank you, Dr. Oz, for allowing us to respond to Gary Smith's claim that this fMRI technology has proven that he is innocent of the crime of murdering my son, Michael McQueen. Michael was a young man who was trusting of folks. He was a young man who was very kind. He had a wonderful sense of humor. People loved him. He had lots of friends. And Gary Smith claimed to be one of those people who was his friend. Yet, when he found his body, instead of calling for help, he took the gun, threw it in the lake, took the bullets out before he did that, and threw the bullets in certain places. We will never know why he killed Michael. The one thing I do know is that there is no machine that can prove that he is telling the truth after he has been found guilty twice. We know that he is a pathological liar. He is a young man whose family has been able to financially support his case. He has had some of the best lawyers in the state to defend him. And obviously he has lied well enough to get past this machine. Even though they say that the mind needs to work harder to lie, it all depending on who lies. And so this technology should not be used for him or for anyone else who try to use this to get off from murder or any other crime. Thank you.
So, Gary, Mrs. McQueen just called you a pathological liar.
Yeah.
How do you respond?
It hurts, but I know that's coming from a place of pain from her, and there's nothing I can do to bring her son back. And I do bear some of that responsibility because I gave him the gun. So I failed him, and if I could spend the rest of my life trying to convince her that I didn't kill her son, and I would. If I could convince one person in this world, it wouldn't be a judge or a jury, it would be her that I didn't kill her son.
What's your life like now?
My life now is really good after getting out of prison. It's hard, but every day I have excitement because I don't have a 35 or 28-year prison sentence. I can move on with my life. I'm going to school, I have a job, and everything's going really well.
Rosemary, Mom, let me give you the final word here. Your son is going to be thought of as being guilty for the rest of his life by a lot of people. How are you going to deal with that?
One day at a time, supporting him, never, ever doubting that he was innocent all along. And just through the grace of God,